When movies first came out, they were short. You had the Nickelodeons, which would show these very short films. But slowly but surely, they started evolving, gaining in length, and they would start interspersing those with the live productions. If you look at any of the ads, especially for the bigger theaters, the Majestic, the Metropolitan, Low State, any of those, especially the Majestic, they would have a full program with different forms of live entertainment plus a movie or a short that would be shown.
Vaudeville sprang up as an alternative to more racy burlesque shows.
When vaudeville started, you lost some of the burlesque aspects, such as the baggy pants comedians, the strippers, things of that nature. But what you gained was a variety of different performers and different acts, everything from contortionists to plate spinners, dog acts, comics, and of course great headliners of the day.
With the Majestic Theater, Carl Hublezel, when he founded Majestic, he wanted to make sure that what he had in his theaters were family entertainment. Keep in mind at the time that theaters had a bad reputation. His idea was that it should be something that he could take his mom or his grandma to see.
So what exactly did you see at a vaudeville show?
The entertainers varied, not only in the show that they would do, but also in quality. Some were really great and some weren't so great. So you would have singers, you would have people who would perform with animals, you would have magicians, you would have some shows that were very much family entertainment, you would have other performers that were a little bit more risque. And
a vaudeville night or evening consisted of usually between 7 and 10 acts. The order of the acts really depended on the hierarchy that you were in at the time in your career. How big of a name were you? Usually the opening act was a big name, and then you would have, it would kind of go down a little bit, to the smaller acts and the unknown acts, and then it would kind of creep back up. The sweet spot, so to speak, was the next to last act in the order, and that's where you would find Fanny Bryce, as opposed to a dog act.
Also on the bill was some scene work, comedic or dramatic.
Small plays, sketches was a very important part of the vaudeville scene. Plays were never very long. They would normally run anywhere between what you would call a blackout, which is where somebody would come out, they'd say one or two funny lines, there'd be a setup, and a punchline, lights out, that's it, 30 seconds. To something longer that might run 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes. W.C. Fields was a big sketch comedian. He did a lot. Joe Besser was a large sketch comedian. So it was definitely a very important part of the vaudeville set, not only because you could fit more people into a sketch than you could in one headliners. So they were able to advertise, we have 50 people in our show, well, 30 of them had one line.
The biggest name stars of the day toured vaudeville houses, including some names from the late 19th century like Lillian Russell or Sarah Bernhardt, and many came through Houston in the early 1900s.
There were a number of very famous acts that did come through, such as the Marx Brothers, and Will Rogers came through. This is back when he was with the Ziegfeld Follies, and he was doing his roping tricks.
Probably one of the largest acts of all time in vaudeville was Daisy and Violet Hilton, San Antonio's Siamese Twins. They commanded literally thousands of dollars per week. Of course, smaller houses such as the one you would find here, because even though it sat 600 at the time, it was much smaller than many of the grand houses that literally sat thousands. So depending on what part of their career they were in is where they played. And then it also depended on what circuit they were on. If you were a big name act and you were playing the Orpheum Keith time, well then of course you probably wouldn't be coming to Conroe.
Many big vaudeville theaters were part of a circuit like the Orpheum or Keith.
Well, the Orpheum and Keith time, they were in the closer, or the larger markets, I should say. There were a lot, of course, vaudeville houses in the smaller markets, but you would have companies that owned and managed vaudeville houses all over the South, all over in smaller cities. In Houston, for instance, there were 2 theaters the American and the Washington, that were wholly owned, managed, and starred African-American performers, and they were called the Toby Houses.
The Toby Theaters helped popularize performers like Bessie Smith, who also played the Key Theater on West Dallas. Patrons at the Tobys could win raffles, prizes such as a ham, a turkey, or the ever-popular gold tooth. Life for a vaudeville performer was not always easy.
Not only did they travel together for the most part, but it was a requirement. You can't have an entire trainload of performers show up missing 5 or 6 acts. So they were required to stay together, stay with everybody. They normally stayed in the same hotel, they ate in the same restaurant. It was just hard on the performers and having to drag them from town to town. In the space of 7 days, these people could literally see 7 different cities. And so living out of a suitcase was exactly what they did. So you went in, you put on your makeup, you dressed, you hit the boards, and that's exactly how it was. Some of the smaller cities, in order to get more revenue, especially when you're in a smaller house, would add a 3rd show. So it's not unlikely that a performer's day might start at noon for a noon show and end at 11 p.m. after their 3rd show.
Vaudeville shows were found in towns big and small.
The primary difference was not only in the decoration of how the houses looked, decorative-wise, aesthetically pleasing. A lot of the smaller houses had some of the same setup, but of course, they were at times a little more than a barn. If you wanted to get a lot of the really big names, you had to go to the larger cities. You had to go to the Majestic in Dallas or the Majestic in Houston or something of that nature, and that's where you saw the stars. And, you had the big names. Bob Hope came through here. Evan Costello came through here.
There were 3 Majestic theaters in Houston, but the second one, opened in 1910, was a true vaudeville palace. 2,000 seats and 8 acts before the movie. It was there that Will Rogers read a telegram announcing the birth of his 2nd daughter in 1913. All 3 Majestics are gone now, but at least one vaudeville theater remains, up in Conroe.
It was built in 1934. It was a vaudeville slash movie house. Vaudeville died, unfortunately, roughly around 1933, so vaudeville never really played here at the Crighton. This house is quite a bit larger than you would normally have built for a community of only 1,100-1,200 people. This is what they had back in the early 30s. So it was kind of an amazing building when they first put it together.
The Crighton Theatre was rescued from the fate met by other venues.
The Crighton Theatre opened in '34, ran till early mid-'60s, and then it went into disrepair. It couldn't compete with all the cinemas out there. At one point in time, the ceiling had a starlit ceiling in it with the twinkle lights in it and so on and so forth. The building fell into disrepair. The roof fell in, and where we're sitting right now was underwater. There were about 1,000 pigeons living in here, and the walls, well, they had on them what pigeons do. This is exactly what was here. All they really had to do, luckily, because it was just dirty at that point. There was no real damage done to the walls. All the frescoes were cleaned up and refurbished. Interestingly enough, they are not painted. That is hand-rubbed glaze. So it took a lot of artisans, a lot of work to try to put it back together, but it was basically a toil of love.
So while vaudeville flourished here for a couple of decades, at least one big name didn't like his Houston experience.
Bob Hope was playing at a theater in Houston at the Majestic, I believe, and his act just went down the tubes. He bombed completely, and as soon as he got off stage, he went to his manager and he asked him for 2 tickets back to his home country.
When we